Alright guys, Gemini, back with another video. And if you're wondering where the hell I am sitting outside of the gas station, of all places. It's because I need a cup of coffee. And I had a little bit too much to drink last night, and I stayed up a little bit too late last night. So I'm feeling a little rough this morning, so I'm going to get a little bit of coffee, a little bit of food, and try to perk back up, because I partied a little bit last night on Thanksgiving. So it is what it is. You know, I'll survive. Okay, first things first. Gemini888 on Twitter. Vincent Flair Facebook. WWE versus TNA Facebook page. And please check out my Ravish and Rick Rude tribute page here on Facebook. Okay, what we're going to do in this video today, on this Friday morning, feeling a little rough. Here's the deal. Right now, the wrestling world is abuzz with the CM Punk podcast, and I had an opportunity last night to listen to the complete hour and 58 minutes of the CM Punk podcast, and I am in shock over everything that went down. I'm going to give you my reaction in this video. It's probably not the best video, you know, feeling a little rough this morning. And a little tired, but this video was on my mind all night to the point where I had like these crazy dreams about CM Punk last night because this podcast affected me so much. So let's start at the beginning. The first 10 minutes of the podcast, you know, I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. You know, Cole Cabana was just, you know, kind of plugging his merchandise, and I was like, yeah, this is, you know, even before that, I was kind of hesitant to even listen to the podcast. Because I was kind of like, nah, I don't really want to hear about CM Punk. So it took like 10 people, including my buddy The Wiz, to tell me, dude, you need to listen to it. And I'll tell you guys, after listening to it, you need to listen to it. It'll open your eyes up about CM Punk. I thought going in that CM Punk was just going to cry and whine and be bitter. It's not the case at all. He had a legitimate beef. The WWE really... And this is all my opinion before you dislike or whatever, but the WWE, they really screwed this guy over. For instance, and you'll find out in the podcast, CM Punk, it turns out, was working with a staph infection. Excuse me. CM Punk was working with a staph infection, and the WWE continued to make him work, and the doctor refused to cut it out and treat him. You know, and I was doing a little research on staph infections last night. You could die from this shit. And even CM Punk mentions in the podcast that you could die from this, which is ridiculous that the WWE would put him in harm's way like that, making him wrestle with something he could die from. And the doctor wouldn't cut it out. Punk asked him like 3 or 4 different times to cut the staph infection out, and he wouldn't do it. He had this big purple and green welt by his waistline, and the doctor wouldn't cut it out. And so it turns out CM Punk is working with a fractured skull. You know, it turns out CM Punk, you know, wants to do sponsorships, and they won't let him, but they'll let Brock Lesnar do it. CM Punk was legitimately hurt, you know, like fractured skull. You know, he had busted up knees. He had a staph infection. I mean, when he left the WWE in January 2013, the guy was legitimately hurt. And the WWE wouldn't do anything about it. So CM Punk sits down in an office with Triple H and Vince McMahon. And he tells him his situation. And, you know, they don't seem to be sympathetic at all. Whatever. Gives Vince a hug goodbye. You know, says goodbye to Triple H, and they keep kind of texting Punk and staying in touch and whatnot, and keep asking if he wants to go back to work, and Punk is like, no, no, no. And so finally, it winds up being, they wind up on purpose firing CM Punk on his wedding day, just to ruin his wedding, to spite him. You know, they fire him on June 11th, his wedding day, just to spite him. And they set this up on purpose, just to piss him off. And then it turns out CM Punk finds an old royalty check from like the year before. And obviously the check was out of date, so CM Punk needs this check reissued. So he calls them. WWE won't call him back. He calls them and calls them and calls them. And he wants to know where he's going to get his royalty check from 2013. And he talks to a couple people. Oh, yeah. They never call him back. They never call CM Punk back for the money that they owe him. And so finally, CM Punk has to go get a lawyer just to get the money that he worked for. How would you like to go to your job today, clock in, and then when it comes to payday, they say, oh, it's our money. We're not going to pay you. Well, think about CM Punk. He had to go to a lawyer to get his money. And I completely believe CM Punk in this situation, because otherwise he wouldn't have waited, 11 months to do it, unless, it was financially. But now, obviously, now CM Punk, got his money and stuff, and he's cool now. But you guys got to remember, that's money that, CM Punk worked for, and the WWE tried to dick him around. Like, for instance, Triple H texted CM Punk 2 days before his wedding. So it was June 9th, 2014. Triple H texted him and said, hey, can we talk? So CM Punk nicely texted Triple H back and says, yeah, we could talk. I just got to go do my wedding and my honeymoon and blah, blah, blah. And so Triple H never texted him back. And Punk's like, what the heck? I thought you wanted to talk. I'll talk after my honeymoon, which is completely fair. So, if this is true, I completely don't blame CM Punk for quitting the WWE. He was hurt. They went on TV during this time frame with a fractured skull and a staph infection, and they made fun of him, called him a quitter. Even though he had worked for, 7, 8 years barely without a day off. And then once he finally is fired, they don't want to pay him the money he worked for. You can't blame, and in this podcast also, he talks about his reactions to some of the people on Twitter who have just been blasting him and making fun of him, and it was an eye-opening experience, and finally the light has been shed on why CM Punk never came back to the WWE. Would you come back to the WWE, to a place that, basically left you to die and then wouldn't pay you for it and played games with you and left you hanging like that? Does that seem like a work environment that you want to work for? I don't blame Punk a damn bit for leaving the WWE. And I think Punk is telling the truth. Like I said, I believe that Punk was telling the truth, because why else would he have waited this long? And he waited this long to make sure that he had his money that they owed him before he said a word. Punk is not a stupid guy. I think it's ridiculous that he had to go to a lawyer to get his money just because the WWE was so underhanded and so sneaky that they played games with him. Just an unbelievable podcast. Just to recap, they give details about his staph infection and when the doctor had to cut it out, how the stuff was oozing up on the ceiling, and it was one of the most painful experiences that he had ever gone through in his life. And if we ever blamed Punk for being a little bitter and a little upset, we can't blame him anymore. I've been there. I have been in CM Punk's shoes, where I felt like I was getting slighted by my workplace, even though I worked so hard for him. I worked for a place a couple years ago, and things wound up not working out, and they wound up handing me like a $600 severance check. After, years of service, I wound up getting like a $600 severance check. And I'm looking at that, like $600, all that time in, barely any time off, and you hand me $600 after I basically handed you my soul. So I side with Punk on this. The podcast is a must listen. It'll open your eyes up about CM Punk. It's 1 hour and 58 minutes. You'll have to have some time. You'll have to have some understanding. But this is not Punk whining and crying at all. This is simply CM Punk coming on the internet and telling the truth with Colt Cabana. It's eye-opening, but it's the truth. And Punk came on his podcast and he told the truth. And the podcast will completely change your view. It'll change your opinion about this whole situation. And who the hell can blame CM Punk? So that's going to recap it. I will put the link to the podcast in the description box. You guys, honestly, if you get 2 free hours, listen to this and you will not believe your ears. I had an opportunity last night after Thanksgiving and all that stuff to spend the 2 hours. You'll need the entire 2 hours to do it, and you'll understand exactly why CM Punk left the WWE. I thought it was because of the fans. I thought it was because, he didn't care. It's not because he didn't care. It's because he's hurt. And he wanted to live. The guy didn't want to die. He was working hurt. He was creatively frustrated. And that's a large part of the podcast, too. He's just creatively frustrated. And is crazy. And Punk had every right to walk out. Those fuckers wouldn't... The doctors there, those fuckers wouldn't help him. He was hurt. He asked for help. He asked for time off. He asked for anything, and they wouldn't do a damn thing with him. It was just, when's the next match? What else can we get out of Punk? He didn't make as much money at the WrestleManias as the other wrestlers did, even though his match at WrestleMania was the best match with The Undertaker. You can't blame Punk anymore. It's not Punk's fault. Straight up. Gemini, I hope you guys enjoy this, and I hope you guys click that link and listen to the CM Punk podcast, because I think he's telling the truth. Leave your comments below. I'm Gemini. Peace out.